Welcome to the presentation of the Organizational War Abolisher Award of 2023 to Wage Peace Australia. This is one of 4 awards in our 3rd annual War Abolisher Awards. I'm David Swanson, Executive Director of World Beyond War. I am filling in here for my colleague, our Vice President and Board Member, Liz Remmerswall, who very much wanted to be a part of this event and couldn't make it. We appreciate everything that you do, Liz. I want to say a few words about Wage Peace Australia. We enthusiastically present this award to this wonderful organization, which is a leading global inspiration to many peace-related campaigns, including those working to close down giant arms fairs. Wage Peace Australia accurately describes its approach as, quote, "We jump on tanks, blockade weapons factories, occupy arms dealers' offices, and reclaim military bases, as well as engaging in public discourse and other more conventional campaign methods," end quote. Wage Peace Australia's campaign to disrupt the largest weapons bazaar in Australia, the Land Forces International Land Defence Exposition, has been so successful that the arms fair will no longer return to Brisbane. It will, of course, likely be held in a different city. But if people learn from the nonviolent, educational, disruptive activism used in Brisbane, then this arms fair and every other one could be chased out of every location on this planet, leaving those whom Wage Peace Australia refers to as harms dealers nowhere to do their harming. Wage Peace is also involved in a campaign to resist the involvement of weapons companies in Australian education. Currently underway is a Wage Peace podcast called Get Your Armies Off Our Bodies, written by Matt Abud and Zelda Grimshaw. The podcast offers an accessible and fresh look at the weapons industry in Australia, presenting militarism through the eyes of Wage Peace people and their friends. Wage Peace Australia works with peace groups in West Papua and has helped World Beyond War to do the same. Wage Peace Australia created the War on West Papua website. Wage Peace Australia is known for its selfless work in collaboration with other organizations. It needs to be known to a broader world. Wage Peace Australia's educational and activist endeavors are explicitly aimed at abolishing war, and its members do outstanding work on demilitarizing security and on building a culture of peace, 2 pillars of World Beyond War's strategy for creating a global security system free of the scourge of war. With that, I would like to welcome, to accept the award, and to introduce some of her colleagues. Margie Pistorius.
Thanks, David. Thanks so much. And here's the award here. So just put it there so people can see it. Thank you so much. But, you know, the award, of course, belongs to a whole set of people. And Dave's here as well. And it sort of belongs to our organizational team. My friends and colleagues, Tricia and Mim, who are here, and Lil and Zelda, of course, who has made a magnificent contribution with her vision and her theatrical sort of approach, like using sort of the organization of the creative arts. And of course, our action crews, and Dave's here representing our action crews and our strategy teams and our broader community, which includes our close friends from the climate movement, who really know deeply how our struggles are interconnected with their struggles, and who have acted so courageously with us, and of course we with them. So we want to acknowledge them, and we want to acknowledge First Nations people who are acting against militarism, the ones that we work with here and others. I live here on Yagara country. We all live in different Aboriginal countries, different territories. And Wage Peace started where Tricia is there on the Gimoy Wallabari Yidinji country, and it's down there in the Widjabul Wibble country. So we're across the whole East Coast, really, with in different territories. And our friend Lara is a Gunungurra woman who supports and who keeps us on track. And also the First Nations people of West Papua, who you mentioned, we're very close allies with them. And they continue to call us to notice and mobilize around the increased militarism that they face, that's affecting their people, their land, and their sovereignty, and the deforestation that's occurring there at exponential rates. So I just want to acknowledge First Nations people first, because they really have borne the brunt of the US militarism and the British militarism over time. And we've learned from them. We've learned from how they fight this hyper-militarism, and we also know what happens to them when they do stand up against this hyper-militarism. And so we hope to stand in solidarity with them. And it's an important part of our program is remembering and commemorating the frontier wars, which we encourage people to do with people-to-people ceremonies, and we've started that through the Cairns ceremony that we've been running now for about 6 years in partnership with the Gimoi Wallabari Yidinji. And this is a chance for it's people-to-people truth-telling, and we think it's very important as a base for anti-militarism work. So we try to link all these perspectives and experiences and link them up together through location-based storytelling, and location-based action, which of course is the old sort of teach-ins and occupations and being in the offices and on the factory driveways and going to the factories, because what we've discovered is there's a weapons factory in every suburb. Well, not every suburb, but certainly every industrial suburb in Australia. There are weapons factories springing up. A lot of them are connected to the US weapons factories, and they're starting to build this sort of electoral connection that keeps them rooted for a very long time, as we know. So our program goes to bold, strategic, direct and discursive action to disrupt militarism in Australia and our region. And I think it's important we organise and mobilise to end war culture. And our program is focused on winning against land forces. That's what we did. We wanted to get it out of Brisbane. And we've connected up with other people around the world, as David mentioned, who are also trying to get arms fairs out of their communities. Our friends in Korea who have a massive arms fair. Our friends in Colombia also have a massive arms fair. And there are arms fairs, of course, in Paris and in London, in Canada. It's these huge, terrible events where people organise to kill other people. And of course, it's taken layers of relationships, the organizational relationships, the strategic, having a strategy teams, action teams, and a community base that enables all of that. And we've really gone for this sort of festival style organizing. I think has been one of our strengths, where people and groups can self-organize, do-it-yourself organizing, find a place to participate, and that participation almost always includes disruption or the very important work of a community and support for that disruption. So we sat disruption inside a broader community, refugees, First Nations people, West Papuans, Palestinian justice and climate actionists. These all came together to say no to the weapons industry. And of course, we were originally inspired by the disruptive work and the disruptive capacity of groups such as Code Pink, the ability of one or two people to go in and make a mess in different situations and smaller groups, and also of the Catholic workers. We have a long history in association with Catholic workers and Catholic Worker Action here. And it's a big shout out to Jim Dowling, who's always been there on the front line of disruption for the last 20 or 30 years in our action crews. So we view disruptive people-powered action by ordinary people using tactics from the politics of nonviolence as being key to shifting the value base and bringing ordinary people into engagement on militarism, defense, war, foreign affairs, international relations, those things that ordinary people are generally sort of pushed out of, and it's sort of left to the inner sanctum. We want ordinary people speaking about those things and ordinary people understanding how the military industrial complex really works, because without those ordinary people on board, we're going to have trouble building a movement. And did we mention we have a podcast, because that's at the moment, that's our number one thing. We've got a fantastic podcast, and Miriam's going to talk a little bit about that. And I'll introduce you to Miriam and to Lil. who are going to speak a little bit more about what they think's great about wage peace. And thank you.
I'm here. I'm speaking from Widgerville land in the north of New South Wales in Australia, and just here listening to what Margie's saying, thinking about my experience of working with wage peace and why it is so empowering it's been to me, is because I'm always learning. This culture of learning that runs through all of the work of wage peace. An example I could talk about is our latest project, Peace Pod, or otherwise known as Get Your Armies Off Our Bodies. And we described on the website, if you go there, as an oral adventure into anti-militarist activism in Australia and beyond, because it's lively and because it's creative, but it's also incredibly informative. And that was partly because of the contribution of Zelda, our supremo creative, really. And it's beautifully professional, and that offers us an opportunity to further the work of wage peace and amplify that message out to the world of anti-militarism. And we are thinking of many ways that we might use this as a resource for learning in communities and in schools and universities. And some of the ways we hope to use this is by holding online events for listening and reflection. And as an ex-teacher, I've been spending some time thinking about how we might link this with our campaign to demilitarize education by creating listening and teaching guides for teachers in schools and universities. And in schools, that will be useful across all of the key learning areas. And in Australia, we've got this idea that across all learning, we should address what's called general capabilities. And they are very important ideas about learning. And in particular, it will address the ideas of ethical and intercultural understanding, and most importantly, critical and creative thinking that's missing in some ways from some education. So all about learning and about truth-telling and storytelling towards our goals.
So hi, I'm Lil. I'm coming to you from Wangal country, a bit further south than the other folks. And I started kicking around with wage peace about 18 months ago. And some of the things, I guess, that I find really appealing about wage peace and why I like working with wage peace and being in these spaces is I think it's not even so much what we're doing, it's the approach that we take to it, where wage peace is one of the only groups I think I've ever worked with who actually really means it when they talk about relational organizing and prioritizing the relationships and the networks that sit behind action that sustain it. And I think that approach is so much more fruitful. And Margie touched upon the festival style organizing. So what we did when we were organizing Disrupt Land Forces was we sort of conceptualized it as a festival, and we were the producers. So we weren't there to tell the band what to play or how to play, but we were there to set up a stage and say, make this space yours. And we've been having a lot of success with that model that's sort of getting away from the scarcity mindset of, well, we can all agree to do this thing or this thing. We can instead make that an and say, you can both do those things. Like everybody do what, as long as you're there, we don't really mind, just come. So that's been a really cool way of working that I've definitely learned a lot from. It requires you to let go of control, which is a thing that I've had to work on, but that's good for you. So you should do that anyway. yeah, that I think I'm really excited about the ways that I'm seeing some of those approaches kind of ripple out into other groups and sort of like learning. We're very deeply reflective about our process and about how we decide to do things, how we're thinking about issues. Maggie mentioned we hold strategy circles sometimes where people who have been to a lot of our actions or are supporting us in some other way get invited into a little strategy, strategy party. And I think that's, yeah, like how one thing that I've definitely learned in my time at Wedge Peace is like, there's some stuff where sometimes if you're an organizer, you feel like you've got to catch every ball and, be on top of absolutely everything. But there's actually a lot of value in leaving some things undone, because then there is space for other people to step into. If you've already sorted everything, there's nowhere for anyone to step up. And I think it's developed me being able to work with Margie and Mim and Trish and Zelda, has really developed my organizing. And I'm really, really grateful to have this council of organizing elders that I get to check in with and have as a brains trust, which has been really cool for my personal development as an organizer.
Thanks, David. Thanks for the award. The war abolishers, we are indeed war abolishers. We do really want to abolish war. So thank you.
And thank you so much for thinking of us. It's very easy to feel like when you're fighting something as large and all-pervasive as the military-industrial complex, it's easy to feel like it's not doing anything and no one's noticed that you're doing it. So thank you. It means a lot.
A lot of people have noticed, and we hope for more people to notice. We are more proud than ever to have found this wonderful organization to give this award to.
Did anyone mention that Wage Peace has a podcast? Get your armies off our bodies.
Did anyone mention that Wage Peace has a podcast?
Did anybody mention that we have a podcast?
I want to now welcome everyone to the presentation of the David Hartsough Individual Lifetime War Abolisher of 2023 Award, which goes to David Bradbury. This is one of the 4 awards in our 3rd annual War Abolisher Awards. It is my privilege to ask Alison Broinowski, our board member from Australia, World Beyond War board member, to present the award to David Bradbury.
Thank you, David. And I'm so pleased to see David and Trina here too, with a beautiful bush background. I'm speaking to you further south from Gadigal land, the Eora Nation. And it's a great pleasure that this day has finally arrived, something that I have been hoping would happen for about a year, when I suggested to David Bradbury that he might wish to accept such an award. And here it is. It's very much like the one that has just been awarded to Wage Peace, because what David and Trina have done as individuals or as a partnership has very much in common with what the Wage Peace team has done. You've heard that on the one hand, they are creative, they are informative, they are educational, they are entertaining. They seek to get, they're professional, they seek to get their message out to the world, and their work is an educational resource. And their objective through all of this is demilitarizing the national and, let's say, global mindset. Now, all of that applies to David and Trina, because as an individual recipient of this award, that is exactly what David has done for years and years and years. I've known him most of that time, and I've known his work for even longer, starting with 1979, before some people out there were born, David's film Frontline just took Australia by storm. It was about Neil Davis, very famous in Australia, very famous war cinematographer and a correspondent who worked in Vietnam for 11 years and indeed died in the region by being caught in hostile fire. Bradbury made as well, in his long series of docos, which are listed on our website, Public Enemy #1. And that was about another Australian journalist, famous too, Wilfred Burchett, who was the first Western reporter who bring to the world the impact of the bombing of Hiroshima only hours and days after it had happened. We've all been transfixed by Oppenheimer, which leaves a lot out, quite frankly. And David has also traveled widely. He's a very footloose character, Central America, doing the Contras, Nicaragua, Central and South American social justice movements all over the place. He got himself into Chile under Pinochet, where he and his crew filmed Chile Hasta Cuando, which was made in 1985. And on it went. This kind of work, which is all listed for people to see, does so much deserve a wider audience. And one of the things that World Beyond War hopes to do as a result of this award is bring to our members and to our global watchers information about how they can see David's work and appreciate the long record that he has established. In 1988, David focused on Australia, filming an Aboriginal family who had been removed from their home at gunpoint. Their home was burnt in front of them, and they themselves were sent off to what was called a nature reserve, a native reserve. Why? So that a mining company could get the bauxite under their land. And that film was called State of Shock. You can understand why. Following that, and here he began to take his titles from popular music, came A Hard Rain, about the impact of depleted uranium in the Gulf War of 1990-1991. We now hear that depleted uranium is being used again in Ukraine. And of course, the enduring effects of depleted uranium were the subject of another of his films about the Shoalwater Bay Naval Training Facility, in which he made a film called Shoalwater Up for Grabs, and then followed that with Blowin' in the Wind. So all of these, the results of militarization and war on ordinary people, which is what Neil Davis was concerned with and what John Pilger has always been concerned with, are similarly concerns of David's. And his work deserves, we think, a much wider audience. It deserves to be seen by more people around the world who will be surprised and perhaps shocked at things they didn't know before. In particular, that applies to David's latest film, The Road to War, which we have all here in Australia just seen. The Road to War concerns the current Labor government in Australia, which has committed hundreds of billions of dollars, or confirmed the commitment of its predecessor to hundreds of billions of dollars into new weapons to kill people of all kinds. Nuclear-propelled submarines for the first time in Australia, stealth bombers, missiles, all of them American, all of them on Australian territory, all aimed at China. And the film explains very clearly, leaves none of the audience unconvinced why it is not in Australia's nor the world's interests to be dragged into another US losing war in our region, which will, in fact, expose the Australian continent and people to much greater danger than anybody else. So, on top of all of that, it is very important for us not only to thank David for his work and recognize it, but also to thank Trina Lenthal for her partnership over many years and her support of David in all of his work.
Thanks, Alison, for those words about the film and my films. And I met Trina in 2005 when we both were brought together at Shoalwater Bay, which is on the central Queensland coast near Rockhampton, where at this very moment, Australian, US forces and 12 other nations are rehearsing for a war with China. And it was the start of a personal relationship and professional relationship that has been really a gift to me in my life, and with what Trina's commitment. I was so taken by this activist that was just whacking out press release after press release on her laptop against the grain with the Fourth Estate in Australia, typically not interested about this critical war rehearsal for war that was happening in 2005. And I fell in love with Trina at the barricades, as it were. A nice dramatic story for a feature film down the track. But anyway, I'll hand it over to Trina now to explain how she got into peace activism and to waging peace against war.
I was told I didn't have to say anything. But well, it's a real honor to be a part of this, and I want to acknowledge the amazing work that Wage Peace does, and of course the incredible legacy of work that David has created since the late 70s. They've really shown a commitment to dismantling militarism, particularly in our country, and also, of course, working towards a world beyond war. I mean, I feel like I stand on the shoulder of giants, people that have come before me, and I guess I particularly want to acknowledge Catholic workers, the Ploughshares movement. I guess it's a small movement, but it is a global movement, and I know people from all over the world as a result of my involvement in activism and anti-militarism work. And whilst we've had many defeats, we've had some victories, and that's incredible that we've been able to stop the land warfare expo in Brisbane. Well done, Wage Peace, amazing. But yeah, I don't know. I wasn't expecting to say anything, so I don't really have a lot to say, but yeah, thank you.
Trina is one of those people that just gets on and does it, and like a lot of the other, particularly women in the peace movement. So yeah, I'm really genuinely humbled to get this award, David, and World Beyond War. Alison, thank you for it. But when I think that it's only a third award, and how many peace activists anonymously around the world that there are, that every day just to get out of bed and to face the possibility of torture, of arrest, death, and so on, that they just get on and do it. So it's truly humbling at the same time. I do accept it on behalf of all the people that every day get on with just try to create a much better world, a world where the weapons manufacturers and the powerful elites that run this wonderful globe of ours are running it into total sort of disrepair are opposed. And I, with Trina, will commit the rest of my life, as with the people that have waged peace. And I'd like to mention also IPAN, Independent Pacific and Peaceful Network in Australia. Those wonderful activists there, Annette Brownlee and her crew out of Brisbane and Melbourne and Sydney, and ICAN as well, that have waged for so long for stopping the nuclear proliferation, and again for Australia to sign the nuclear disarmament treaty, which Albanese, our Prime Minister, said he would do when he was in opposition, but has yet to step up to the mark. In fact, he's gone the other direction, and going with a nuclear lobby group out of the United States. So we've got a lot of work to do, folks, as we all know at this table here, and let's get on with and do it.
We are at World Beyond War are very proud to be able to give these awards to both of these recipients, and hope that we'll have time to get around to honoring more and more of the people you've mentioned and cited and credited with inspiring you, and that this will be part of building a larger movement.
Trina was part of the first management group for Wage Peace and helped us sort of kick on and bridge from the Talisman Sabre work that we had been doing and Pine Gap work over to the sort of the weapons work that we were doing. We decided to shift from the things that were out in the country that were quite hard for us to get to for a small movement, and to shift into the city and do city-based work for a while to build the capacity in the city. So Trina was part of that, and of course David was as well. And we've worked together in the past on the doco that David did on Brian Law and Graham Dunstan's trial, for Plowshare's action against the attack helicopter. So there are stories here that are, you're right, that need to be told more broadly, that are not that well known. And there's some successes, and what we can see now with the work that Alison's crew does, and MAPWA and IPAN and ICAN, that we are starting to rebuild the peace movement from the bottom up, and that we have all the parts of an ecology that you need for a peace movement. We've got the sort of doctors' associations, the professional associations for peace. We've got the broad independence group that's Independent Peaceful Australia. We've got the grassroots people's organisations that's trying to get people-powered action, and we've got some sort of we've got our most tremendous strength we have in Australia is our journalists. We have a lot of journalists who have flipped over to be on our side in their retirement, and we have the most astounding group of journalists who are writing on peace and militarism issues in the most beautiful and powerful way. So we are really set to take off in the next period of time if we can keep that that proportionality and treat each other with complete respect, and look towards growing our movement in Australia to sort of resist the terrible American onslaught that we're now facing, where Australia is becoming, as they say, not a country, but a American base with marsupials. Which is a quote from Caitlin Johnston. And of course, she's one of our great writers writing on these issues. So we are really set. I think the people-powered stuff could do with more resources, because it's hard, it's on the grassroots, it's unvalued, except by you. Thank you. It's largely unvalued, it's largely unpaid, and it's quite risky work. So but we had the other stuff we're starting to have in spades, and it's looking really great.
May I just put in a little plug alongside what Margie has said for my own original movement, which is Australians for War Powers Reform. Now that actually doesn't go as far as World Beyond War, but we've been working for years to try and change the way Australia goes to war, and that, of course, is something that our American friends are engaged in as well. And along with the groups that Margie mentioned, we are all in touch with each other. You know, we're all talking to each other all the time.
I think it's really good that you're aiming wage peace to get it into schools, because as we know, the weapons manufacturers are targeting universities and now schools as well. It's an official policy to get the kids brainwashed at as early age as they can to see war as being fun, the same way they call exercises, military exercises are deadly, that we just saw 4 Australians killed 2 weeks ago, war games. War is anything but a game. And the sooner we get our young people into that mindset that that war is not a game, and using this podcast, it would be really great to see it into the secondary schools and into the universities as well. Because as I learned from Wage Peace, Australia is now 4 years into its target with the ambition to become the 10th largest manufacturer and exporter of weapons in the world, on a par with Israel. So we've only got 6 years to go to have that sort of dubious honor to be the biggest manufacturer of weapons, the 10th in the world. I think that's disgusting that Australia, that once prided itself of sticking up for the little guy and looking out for his mates, has got that as its ambition under a Labor government as well. I tell you, did anyone mention a podcast?
You know, it's a great piece of work, and we want everybody to sort of share it so that it can reach new audiences. It's designed to bring new audiences, it's not for the people who already know what's going on, but it's for the next layer out. So it's an evergreen podcast, 6 or 7 episodes, produced by Wage Peace. So it covers our sort of work and our perspectives. It's designed to bring people in. So if you can, please share it into new audiences.
Why is that great? Because knowledge is our power. So podcast, Peace Pod. Yeah.
The one that I like to think about is never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. So along with that particular quote, and coming out of the Catholic social justice teachings, I think even though you feel alone and you feel small, and we are a small group, but we've taken advantage of our many opportunities, and we're starting to see the fruits of our particular commitment.
Terrific comments here from everybody, and terrific and very hopeful work happening in Australia, but happening in Australia as part of what is increasingly a global movement. And in giving these 2 awards to Australians, and an award to people in Argentina, and an award to people in Western Sahara, all of whom we think could benefit greatly from each other if they aren't already. We hope to be building a larger movement in each of these places and globally as one movement, because the war industry itself is absolutely globalized, and we need to shut it down. Thank you and congratulations to David Bradbury and to Wage Peace Australia. Everyone can find more about the War Abolisher Awards at WorldBeyondWar.org.
Good on your World Beyond
Amazing
War.
work.
Yeah.
Thank you.